In this video, we'll be talking about the mirror modifier and the array modifier, which are really important modifiers in Blender. So before we do that, I'm going to create, by pressing Shift A, a monkey in our scene. And there are some things that we need to discuss about how some of these modifiers work and the origin point of the object. If you don't know how the origin point works, please refer to the video on origin points, which is, I think, video number 7. So, let's say that we want to have this monkey be symmetrical, and we want to edit just one end of it. Like, for example, right now, if I go to edit mode, and I start moving these vertices over here, basically I'm moving just one side. Let's say that we want to have symmetry on this model. And if I move them from this point, they're getting moved from the other side as well. There is a way we can do that. And that's by going over here to the modifier properties and adding a mirror modifier. And right now, if I go to edit mode and I start moving these, you're going to notice some weird stuff happening. That weird stuff is based on the fact that if I turn off this modifier, we have geometry on both sides of this object. In order for us to have good working symmetry, we need to remove the part that we want to mirror. So basically, I'm going to go to edit mode, I'm going to select faces, I'm going to press Alt and Z to make everything transparent. I'm going to select all of the faces here. I'm going to press delete, faces, select this little part that was left out here and delete it as well. And I am going to enable the modifier again. Then I'm going to go to vertices, select the vertices, and now you can see that everything is working as it should. There are several things that need to be said about this modifier. So basically the way the modifier works is it takes the origin point of the object and it mirrors on an axis solely based on where the origin point of the object is located. So what do I mean by that? If I disable the modifier and I select this and move it over here, you can see that based on the origin point, it mirrored the monkey to the other side, but just like half of it, not like it's not stitched together or anything. So let's do a couple of undos and see what would happen if I move the monkey in object mode. It's still being mirrored as we want it to be. Why is that? Because the origin point travels with the monkey. So let's see what's actually happening here. If I disable this, we see the origin point over here. And we go to edit mode. And we move in edit mode the geometry while we're in edit mode. The origin point keeps its place in the world center. That's really important because that's from where we're doing all of our operations for this object. Let's do a couple of undos. If we move from object mode, it moves the origin point with it. So let's do a couple of more things. In edit mode, we can also add objects. Shift A, cube, Shift A, quad sphere. And what you're going to start to notice is, if we go to object mode, these will all be one and the same object with one and the same origin point. If we want them to be separate objects, we need to add them through object mode, and then they're going to have their own origin point. So basically the origin point, again, let's go over this, is the place from which everything about this model originates. anything that you add through edit mode belongs to this mesh. Everything that you add through object node creates a new mesh. So now let's get back to mirroring. If we mirror this right now, we're mirroring it across the x-axis. Look up here. The axis corresponds to what we're mirroring. If we switch up this axis, like say we do y, you can see that we're mirroring it across the y-axis. Pretty much the same if we go with z. You can mirror across multiple axes, like for example x and y. However, there are very few situations where you'd want to do that. If something's perfectly symmetrical, you may just want to model one quadrant of it and then mirror it across all axes, but that's a very particular case. So let's continue with the mirror modifier. Like if, for example, right now I go into edit mode, you're going to see something. If I move this, we get to see Suzanne's head split open, which isn't nice. How do we avoid this? By clicking the clipping option. That snaps the vertices. And right now, when I move these, Suzanne's head won't split open, and the mesh will remain watertight. So basically, any edit I do from here on out is going to be perfectly symmetrical. Okay. Let's go back to object. Let's delete Suzanne. And we're going to add another Suzanne to the scene that we're going to tinker with a bit. So let's say that I scale this thing a lot, like across multiple axes. Let me remind you about this here, the object properties. You're going to see the scale here being moved, like it's, as I've told you in the previous videos, the scale here is, for example, 1.5, this one is 0.5, this one is 0.9. Right now the object knows that it's being scaled, and it knows that based around where it originates from and how the values have changed. If we want to have the object look like this and not have this data here, but for it to be 1-to-1-to-1, which is very important when we use modifiers like the one we're going to use next, the array modifier, we want to come here to object, go to apply, and click all transforms. And we basically have everything here zeroed out. This is really important for animation, really important. So basically, whenever you do operations like this, remember when you're done to apply your scale and basically everything else from apply, all transforms. One thing you can do, which is a little bit different, if you go to edit mode right now and you select everything and you scale that up, you're going to see that this doesn't change. That's because everything you're doing here is done in edit mode. If you do these changes while in edit mode, your object is going to stay in the 1-to-1 scale and not need anything applied to it. But that's only if you do these changes in edit mode. Okay, so let's remove this and go to the next modifier, which is the array modifier. You've seen the mirror modifier, now we're going to do the array modifier. So I'm going to add a cube to the scene. I'm going to go to modifiers, and I'm going to click array, and you can see that we have another cube here in the scene. Here is the number of cubes that we're creating in the scene from the count type. The factor is what is the distance between these cubes on that particular axis. So let's say we have 1.5 here. That basically means we have 6 cubes spread across the x-axis, and the distance between each and every one of these cubes is 1.5. What would happen if we press 1.5 on the y as well? Ooh, look, Now you're deforming it on the y-axis as well. Let's zero out the x-axis and see what happens. Then we just manipulate it on the y-axis. Now if we press, say, 2 on the z-axis, looky look, we're going upwards now as well. Let's zero these out and see what happens. Now let's tweak this by hand so you can notice what we're doing. Let's start doing this by hand. Let's kind of go back to what we had initially, 1.5 here, and zero these out. Let's say we want to have a bunch more of these. Let's say we want to fill a grid. What we can do is add another array modifier. And boom, look, we're stacking them, one across the other. Let's say we want to have this entire row be duplicated across the y-axis. So we zero out the x, we go to 1.5 on the y, and we start increasing the count. And look what's happening. We've basically created a grid of cubes. We can add another array modifier. And with that array modifier, we're going to basically press everything here up. So let's zero out the x because it's duplicating across the x-axis. We want the z-axis. And let's go for 1.5 on the z. 1.5 on the z, and let's go up to 6. And look, we have a cube made entirely out of cubes. Any changes we made to the very first one in the stack are going to affect the entire stack of modifiers going forward. So you need to experiment with this basically to see how it works, but it's really nifty. There are other things you can do with arrays. You can spray the cubes here or any other object that you want to use across a curve, but there will be a separate video for this one because it's a bit specific, and you can refer to it along the course guidelines. So that's it from now. See you in the next video.